start that recording. I hope you'll enjoy today's session. Without further delay, I'd like to introduce our featured presenter today. He is Executive Leadership Coach and Professional Development Consultant, Mr. Brian Ackles. Brian, you now have the floor.
Well, thank you, Kelly, and thanks for that wonderful introduction. And welcome to everyone to this brief webinar on Introduction to Emotional Intelligence. It's a topic which raises a lot of eyebrows when I talk to people for the first time about emotions in the workplace. So we'll get a little bit of a taste of what this is all about over the next little while. So a couple of objectives of today's presentation: look at the key competencies of what emotional intelligence actually is, and also look at different ways that you can define a path to learn and enrich your own emotional intelligence. So, what is emotional intelligence? What is this actually all about? Before I get into doing this, I would like to ask Kelly to just run the first poll that we have. And what I'd like you to do is just to indicate your level of experience or understanding of what emotional intelligence is. So Kelly, you can go, yeah, perfect. You can go ahead and run that. That's excellent. Thank you. So emotional intelligence, and again, as I said earlier, when people start talking about emotions in the workplace, particularly in technical workplaces, people tend to shy away from that word emotion, and it's something which we are taught at some level to say, well, emotions don't really have a place in the workplace, and you park your emotions at the door when you go to work. Unfortunately, that doesn't really happen. As human beings, we are emotional creatures. We're driven by emotions 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And to realistically expect you to park your emotions at the door when you go into the office is not something which really many people are able to do, and really you shouldn't be able to do it. It's your emotional makeup makes up who you are, and understanding that and understanding how emotional intelligence can help you within your workplace is something which we will discuss as we go through. So,
All right.
how are we doing with the poll, Kelly?
Great. We've got about 55% of the people are right there in the middle. They have some understanding of emotional intelligence. And then we've got 42% that have little to no understanding. So that's great that they're on this webinar. And then we've got 3% that have a great understanding.
Excellent.
So I'll go ahead and close this.
Perfect. All right. Well, that's good to know that the audience, the people that I'm talking to here, have some understanding of emotional intelligence. And for those of you for the half of you that have no understanding, by the time you get to the end of this, you will have I think you'll have a picture of what we're going to be talking about. So, what is competence in emotional intelligence? So, understanding and being able to manage your own moods and your own emotions. Think about how an emotional event affects you. How do you respond to that? How do you control your impulses? So if you're out driving and you're driving in traffic and somebody cuts you off, what is your first reaction? What is your immediate what do you want to do? Do you want to chase them, or do you just go, okay, whatever, it's fine? How about enhancing your communications with others? If you understand and you can empathize with people, your communication with them will take on a different tact, if you will. People will understand. You'll be able to understand the message that they're trying to convey to you, both in their language and in their body language, and also through just their emotional cues as well. Think about engaging change. Change is in organizations is something which is what we're all dealing with now at an ever increasing rate, and with change comes some level of upset within the organization. People fear change, and fear is an emotion. So understanding that and understanding how to overcome people's fears of change and engage them on a level which helps them understand the benefits of change is part of your EI competence. It helps you solve problems, particularly when you're solving problems within a group. It's much easier, of course, particularly in technical areas, in any area, to deal with problem solving using multiple viewpoints. But getting a number of people in a room to work through something also brings up people's emotional change, emotional cues. If someone's very passionate about one solution and they're refusing to listen, well, how do you manage that? How do you deal with that? How do you build a strong network of people? How do you build strong networks using emotional competence? And also manage your own stress in situations which can be somewhat challenging. We all get them. I have a corporate job at this point, and there are stresses which come up each and every day, and I'll talk about some that have happened to me actually this morning in my normal work this morning. Our views of intelligence, and we'll take a little bit of a step back and talk about intelligence before we dig into the guts of EI. Intelligence has changed. We're all familiar with IQ. In measuring your IQ, we've all maybe had our IQs measured at some point in the past. The average person scores somewhere between 70 and 130, and it's all based on your ability to learn and retain information. There is, as the slide shows, there's a very small percentage of the population which scores at the genius level over 145. I don't consider myself one of those, by the way, just to be clear. But IQ represents one dimension of intelligence. And although it's important and it does have some success record in predicting how people will succeed, it's not the full view of intelligences. It doesn't automatically translate into job success. So people with a very high IQ might be very brilliant, but they can be extraordinarily poor leaders and very poor pilots of their own private lives. It's that ability to socialize, it's that ability to empathize, which doesn't necessarily go hand in hand with people with a high IQ. So success at work really is built upon more than just intelligence, and a multifaceted view of intelligence is really required here. You need the social skills, you need the ability to empathize, you need the ability to self-motivate, all of these have to come into a package to really enhance your success as a leader and as a driver in an organization. So back in the early about 1982, 83, a guy by the name of Howard Gardner refined and redefined what intelligence actually means and came up with these 8 types of intelligences beyond the traditional IQ. So there's interpersonal intelligence, intrapersonal intelligence. So how do you deal with others and how do you deal with yourself? How do you deal your bodily and kinesthetic intelligence? How are your movements controlled? Are you seen as a very smooth person when it comes to your gestures, or are you fairly jerky? Musical intelligence, your ability to understand and deal with rhythms. Logical, mathematical intelligence, tied very closely to musical. Verbal linguistic intelligence, how do you use words? How do you use language? Are you seen as somebody that's a very good communicator, someone that uses language in a beautiful way? Visual spatial intelligence is the naturalist, your ability to deal with the natural world. All of these are different intelligences that make up our total brain, if you will. This field of multiple intelligence really opened the door on research into how humans actually behave. And back in the 80s, this guy by the name of Wayne Payne first used this term emotional intelligence in his thesis, in his PhD thesis. This was further developed in the academic world by Drs. John Mayer and Peter Salovey, and then popularized really into the mainstream by Daniel Goleman. Now, Daniel Goleman, when he wrote his book on emotional intelligence, this was really a groundbreaking way of viewing your intelligences and your emotions and how they actually affected you and helped you succeed at work. And he really was, and still remains, pivotal in the world of work in helping people understand how to measure and how to value emotional intelligence. So now, Emotional intelligence has left the lab, right? So again, developed in the academic circles, popularized by Daniel Goleman, and Goleman continues to refine this, and look him up online, look for his books. He's an extraordinarily easy to read author as well. So he looks at the key components that anybody can use to help develop their emotional competence. And really developing that emotional competence is what is going to be key for leadership success. So if you think about it, you're intelligent people. You've got a good job, you're in positions of leadership, and you may be struggling with some areas and struggling with getting your team motivated. You may be struggling with engaging with the leadership team in your organization. There may be challenges with that leadership team. If you can build on your emotional intelligence and build on your ability to relate better to people and look beyond the particular traditional work pieces, but look at people as a whole human being, look at their emotions, how their fears and their insecurities and their drives and their passion. How does all of that relate to the message that they're communicating, or how does that all relate to how they're actually working? If you can gain an understanding of that through your own emotional intelligence and emotional competence, that's going to help you become a much better leader. So there's some first steps according to Goleman. So emotional intelligence is demonstrated through emotional competence, personal and social emotional competence. So you need to develop your emotional vocabulary. We don't typically use emotional words in the workplace. It's still unusual for somebody in a meeting to speak up and say, what you have said actually makes me feel quite angry, and it really upsets me the way that you presented that. Not a lot of people are still using those types of words, or people who say things like, I'm absolutely delighted with how you presented that, and actually expressing that joy of someone who's done a wonderful presentation. Or, I'm feeling very insecure about this path that we've taken, about this strategy, or about this tactic, or about this design. I don't feel that it's the right thing to do. And by using the word feel, or I'm upset about it, or I'm concerned, those are emotional words. Those are emotional vocabulary words that we need to start to bring in. We also need to start understanding and managing your own feelings and moods. If you have a really tough commute into work, and you're delayed, there's been a bad accident, you've missed it, you maybe had to take a phone call while you're on your hands-free set, of course, in your car, do a meeting that way instead of being in the office, and it hasn't gone as well as you hoped, you've been distracted, you get into work and you're frustrated and your stress levels are rising, and you just don't feel like it's going to be a good start to the day. Well, you have to understand that when you walk into the office and you're feeling that way, your feelings are actually translated directly to the people that you interact with. They're going to see this on your face. They're going to see it in your body posture. They're going to see how you actually feel. People will see how you feel. So understanding as you're getting out of the car that you've had that you're upset, and that it's been tough to get into work. You want to understand that those feelings and moods are going to affect people in the workplace. So how do you deal with that? How do you manage that? And understanding that and comprehending how your emotions are going to affect others and how others' emotions actually affect you as well. So if somebody else is upset, do you ignore it? Do you just sort of pass it off? Say, oh, they just probably had they just had a bad day, or whatever. They've been pretty stressed out. I'll just let it pass. But the emotions of others could have some other deeper rooted meanings, which could have a more lingering effect on the workplace and on the work that you're trying to accomplish. So if someone's having a challenging situation in their personal life that's bringing into work, and if that person is a key member of your team, for instance, and they're distracted and they're not able to give their whole output, well, if you engage with them and understand and start to comprehend their emotions and actually talk to them about it, that can go a long way to helping people understand that that you care, and not that you're going to fix their problems, and that's not the point of this. It's just letting people know that you care about them, that you empathize with them, and that you see that something is going wrong, and maybe there is something that you can do to help them. Right? Maybe they need to take a couple of days off to deal with something, and they're afraid to ask. Well, maybe if you're in a position to give them that time off and it's going to be suitable for your work environment, great. But if you hadn't engaged them and talked about seeing their emotions, you wouldn't have known. And this goes into communication and engagement with other people. Right? You need to talk to people. You need to understand them. And all of this drives towards building really strong and effective personal networks and relationships. So all of this, these are and this is just the getting started steps. So let's talk about caring and compassion and empathy. So this application of emotional competence means that you really genuinely care for other people. And then let me repeat that you genuinely care for other people, and that you demonstrate compassion and that you demonstrate empathy for the people around you. This is not something you can fake. People see through the phonies, right? And the first thing that springs to mind when I think about phonies is go to a used car lot and go talk to a used car salesman. Now, that's an example, and it's a generalization. I hope I'm not insulting any used car salesman on the line, but there is an image of people that, this is a great car, it's a wonderful car, I truly see that you're going to love this car, and you don't feel that they're being genuine. And if you're disingenuine when you're talking, when you're dealing with other people, when you're expressing empathy, people will see that. So Goleman looked at 5 different pieces of emotional intelligence, and we'll step through these in a bit more detail. Self-awareness, self-regulation and management, social skills, and motivation and passion. And these are the 5 sort of key skills and key areas of emotional intelligence. So let's go through these one by one. So let's talk about self-awareness. Your ability to understand your emotions, your ability to understand your moods, energy levels, and what drives them. So what makes you feel energized? What makes you feel depressed, stressed? What pushes your buttons? What makes you angry? What makes you happy? What makes you disappointed? What makes you engaged? What makes you smile? What makes you feel that you're hanging on somebody's every words? This is self-awareness, understanding what those particular things are. You have to become self-aware before you can actually start understanding others. So I know that I have, personally, I suffer from a bit of road rage. I've dealt with this for years. I get very angry when people cut me off in traffic, and I drive through city traffic back and forth to work every day. So it's a pretty common occurrence. But I've learned over the years to take a deep breath, just stop my first reaction, and say, okay, does it really matter that this person is now in front of me? I didn't have an accident, they didn't have an accident. Does it really matter? And the answer is always, no, it doesn't really matter. Maybe that person's in a real rush to get somewhere because they've got something really important to do. Maybe they're just having a really bad day and they didn't see you. But understand, I understand that for myself. I understand what makes me happy. What makes me happy at work is seeing a colleague accomplish something that they didn't think they could do. That brings a real smile to my face, and I will go over and I will tell that person that, I'm really happy that you managed to get through that work, or that was a great piece of work. But you develop that self-awareness over time, and it's all about being, really rawly honest with yourself as well. And it's looking at yourself in a mirror without and taking off the rose-colored glasses. So you recognize both, your the best that you have and the worst that you have, and understand that the worst, if you understand the things that you demonstrate which may not be the best, you can work on those. Let's talk about self-regulation, because that feeds in from self-awareness. So managing your emotional responses. So think about the times when you've been working with a team, or you've set up something and the expectations were for something to be delivered on time, or for budgets, for a certain budget to be met, and those expectations haven't been met. What is your emotional response to that? The context that's driving that emotional response. What does not meeting the time frame actually mean, for instance? And is this a disaster for the company? Is this part of a problem which is ongoing in the organization? Are people being very critical of you and your work because you haven't met expectations? Understand the context and understand what's driving your emotional response to a situation. So your ability to manage that and take that step back. The brain is a funny thing. We have about a half a second between the fight or flight response that happens in an emotionally charged situation. And a half a second doesn't sound like a long time, but it is. And a half a second can generate your ability to take a very quick breath and engage your logical mind to respond to whatever's pushing your button, whatever's triggering you. Let's talk about motivation. How do you feel when you fail? How do you react when something has not gone as well as you thought it was going to? How do you react? How do you deal with that? How do you motivate yourself? How do you become that person that picks themselves up and just moves forward and saying, well, you know what? That sucked. Really didn't work out the way I thought it was going to, but let's go forward. What can we learn from this? How can we move through this? How do you take that, those negative thoughts, turn it into positive thinking, and use your own mental strength and mental fortitude to say, right, let's move forward. Let's do this again. Let's do it better. Don't do the same thing again, because like Einstein said, if you do the same thing over and over and you get the same, and you keep getting the same results, that's kind of the definition of insanity. So, learn from your past, learn from where failure was, and move through it. Self-motivate. Don't look for others to give you a pat on the back and say, well, it's okay, don't worry about it. You can move forward. You need to do that for yourself. Now, you can also do it for others. You can also help people, and motivate them as well. But you can't motivate other people until you're motivated yourself to move forward. So now let's talk about empathy. Empathy is one of those words which is, it's a very touchy-feely word. And it's really only been used in the English language, in common usage in the English language, since the early 1900s. And it's really been only popularized since we started talking about emotional intelligence in the 80s. So empathy, it enhances so many aspects of our lives. It enhances our social interaction, it enhances collaboration, it enhances our ability to understand others and understand their behavior. And it's that expression, put yourself in somebody else's shoes. Why are they feeling the way that they are feeling? Understand what's driving them. Understand what's driving their emotion. And empathy really is, it's the cornerstone. It's the cornerstone of social dynamics, and it's the cornerstone of culture and the strength of a culture in any organization. So understanding people, what drives them. Do you know the people that you work with, or do you only know them at work? Do you know what their lives are like outside of work? Do you have an appreciation of some of the challenges that they may be facing, or some of the successes and the joys that they're facing in their lives as well? Because all of this it becomes a whole package as a person. And being able to empathize with somebody opens up that view of the whole person. And that whole person is the person that shows up for work every day. And that's the person that you need to be working with. And your ability to understand that comes from your ability to empathize with people. So it enhances communication. It enhances your ability to facilitate meetings. It enhances your ability to coach people, to mentor people, to engage with people. Think about your negotiation situations. You're negotiating with a customer, or you're negotiating with a vendor, and you're sitting across the table face to face, and you're trying to understand where they're coming from. You're trying to empathize with them. You're dealing with conflict. You're dealing in a situation where emotions are high. Why are people reacting the way that they're reacting? Does this particular conflict really touch a nerve with them? And if you have an understanding of that person and you can empathize with their position, then that's going to help you get through the conflict. decision making. Understanding your own emotions, understanding the emotions of others is going to help you make better decisions. And all of this is going to lead to a more cohesive company culture. And this is really the key. It's just not just, emotional intelligence isn't just about yourself. It's about you, and it's about the people around you, and it's about the greater organization. So, and it's about the underlying culture. If people work well together and they understand each other and they communicate well, they engage well, they can empathize with each other, your organization is going to succeed beyond your wildest expectations. Last and not least, of course, is the social skills. And this is the ability to socialize with others in very complex environments. So you're at a trade show, you're at a conference, and you're in a room full of people. How do you react in that room full of people? Are you the person that stands in the corner, or do you talk to everybody? Do you quote unquote work the room? Do you talk to people? Do you share their jokes? Do you understand people's jokes? Do you understand the hidden relationships in a room full of people? Do you understand the politics in that room full of people? Do you understand the general politics of where you work? All of these are the social skills, and these are all skills that you can build on. You can build your social skills. You can understand, you can start to gain an understanding of the relationships beyond the organizational chart in the organization. But where does the real power lie? How is the organization structured? Does it sit in an operations group? Does it sit in a technology group? Does it sit in a support function, in the admin function? All of these are skills which you can learn and which you can build on. So, Kelly, if you could run the next poll, please. And this is really to talk about your thoughts on learning EI and what you think and how long this will take. So Kelly, if you can go ahead and run that, that's great. Thank you.
Sure.
So EI, as we've talked about, emotional intelligence is seen as it is a soft skill. There's no question that it's a soft skill. But like any skill, it can be learned. And this is really the key to emotional intelligence. It is something that you can learn. The same way that you can boost your own intelligence, your raw intelligence on a particular area of expertise that you work in. You can also boost your intelligence, your emotional intelligence, through training, through learning, through reading, through engagement. There's any number of ways that you can do this. So how are we doing on the poll?
All right, so it looks like we're about 74% for requires long-term commitment and dedication, 26% for no different than any other work-related skill, and then 1% for something you either have or you don't.
Interesting. That's always nice to see something add up to 101%.
It keeps changing, so.
Yeah, well, that's as people start to understand their emotional intelligence, they change their views. That's great. That gives me some good information. And it also demonstrates that the people listening, who of course I can't see, but I think that you're getting this. That it is a long-term commitment and dedication. The same way as learning any new skill is long-term commitment and dedication. You can go ahead and close that poll now, Kelly. That's great. It's the 10,000 hours of practice idea, right? You don't become an expert in anything without long practice. And it's the same thing with EI. You don't read a book and go, oh, hey, I'm emotionally intelligent. That's brilliant. No, it takes practice and it takes time. I've been working in the corporate world for more years than I care to share. And early on in my career, I made some significant gaffes and mistakes, if you will, and I won't share what those particularly were, because even today, many years on, it's still somewhat embarrassing for me. But I can tell you that I've learned from the mistakes that I've made, and it is something that you can learn from, and it is a lifelong journey. That's not to say that it's going to take you your entire lifetime to learn how to get good at this, but it does require commitment and dedication. So, all right, so learning to be emotionally competent. It's it is a bit different than learning to saw a piece of board. It's using your whole brain, right? And it's really developing the social brain. every person will have different strengths in those different 5 areas of emotional intelligence. Some will be very good at self-motivation, self-regulation. Some will have really strong empathy skills, but they may not be good in a social situation, in a larger social situation. You know, everybody will have certain strengths in certain areas. It's really being, brutally honest with yourself to say, okay, what do I do well, and where do I really need to concentrate on learning more about it, and learning and taking that sort of lifelong commitment of being patient and caring for others. I keep coming back to the idea of caring for others, because really, from my perspective, and a lot of my colleagues who I talk about with EI a lot, empathy really is a cornerstone to all of this. If you can understand somebody else, then you can also understand yourself, and all of this will start to wrap around and wrap together. So look for areas of development. There's a number of assessment tools out there. There's one called Emotional Intelligence 2.0 by the Gallup organization. Ask for feedback from the people you work with, from your colleagues. Ask for feedback from your family. Apply what you learn and get more feedback. Don't ask for feedback the next day. Practice your social skills. Practice empathy. Practice, self-regulation, self-motivation, self-management. And if you practice that over a period of months, ask for feedback after some time to see if people are noticing a difference in you. And one of the best ways to learn this is to teach it. Coach other people, mentor other people. I mentor project managers outside of my own organization, and I mentor managers and project managers inside my organization. And I got to tell you, it's one of the most satisfying and one of the most sort of soul-fulfilling and soul-satisfying experiences I ever have. Is just working and coaching and mentoring other people, and seeing the light come on when they understand that they're not alone in this journey as they go through and learn how to work within an organization. So if you have that opportunity, I would encourage you to take that as well. Being emotionally aware and expressing your true feelings is not an easy task. It can be very difficult for some people. Learning to be honest with yourself, and learning to deal with others and being honest with others in an appropriate manner really helps build your character, builds your maturity levels, and it also builds your confidence, and it builds your emotional health. Being honest is something which, we can all be honest. You can tell somebody, I tell it like it is. I'll be brutally honest with you. Well, maybe being brutally honest isn't the best way of dealing with it. Being gently honest might be a better way. Understand the context that you're dealing with people, and the context of the information that you're sharing, and the context that you're interacting with the people. How does it all fit together? And again, understand that this is not something which is easy for a lot of people. So even if your own emotional intelligence has been developed well, understand that other people may have challenges in doing this. Build good, trusting relationships. Build long-lasting relationships with people. How many people do you work with that, or have you worked with in the past that you still keep in touch with? Build those relationships. Keep them. Even if you've moved on from a company, if you're 2 or 3 companies ago and you've still got, people that you work with that you want to keep in touch with, use them. Use the social media platforms for this. I have quite a massive LinkedIn connection list, and I still reach out and talk to as many people as I can on a regular basis through LinkedIn. It's a great professional social media tool, and I'm not an advocate. I don't get paid by LinkedIn, by the way. I just really like it as a business tool. Make sure people perceive you as credible, as honest and trustworthy. When they come and ask you a question, can they trust that the answer that you're giving them is valid and is true? This all feeds towards your mental and physical well-being. So I know this comes up as a breakout activity, and this is something which is taken from a much longer course, as Kelly said. This isn't to replace a course, but instead of an activity, I'm going to give you just a bit of a situation that I actually dealt with this morning in my sort of 9 to 5 career job. So I had some work assigned to a very experienced team of people to install and commission some new hardware in a data center that we have, which is about 3 hours away from our office here. So 3 hours away in this data center, I've got vendor personnel have shown up. I've got two technicians that have driven up the day before, and I get a call this morning. There's no hardware. The guys didn't bring it up with them from our head office. They forgot to bring the hardware with them, a switch and a router. So my first reaction is, you know, and this is this half-second response. My first reaction is, why did you do this? You know, I've trusted you guys to do this. I didn't say that. I said, okay, well, you know, we'll figure out a way. We'll get you the hardware. We'll get it up there today. I got off the phone with them, and I had to call their manager at our office. And again, I've now had some time to think and to sort of gauge my reaction and gauge my emotions on how I'm going to deal with this situation when I actually call their manager, because we have to get this hardware up there. So instead of launching into him and saying, you know, why did this happen? You know, we need, you know, this shouldn't have happened. This was the wrong thing. Turned it around to say, right, we have a problem. It doesn't really matter how it happened. We need to get this hardware to this data center. Can one of your team drive it up there? Right, it's a 3-hour drive, so 6-hour round trip. Do you think, you know, can this be managed today? And because it was phrased as a question and as a solution to a problem, as opposed to an attack on how that team was managed, the instant response I got back from the manager was, absolutely, I'll do it myself. So as we speak, he's driving, you know, the 3 hours up to deliver this equipment so we can get this work done, so we can, you know, finish off a major chunk of work that we've had ongoing for quite a while. So again, managing, you know, I was able to stop for a second and just say, okay, don't attack. We'll deal with why it happened later when the work is finished. Look for the positive, look for a way to get around the problem, and this is where emotional intelligence can really, really help you. So we come to the end of this workshop and this very brief webinar, and you know, in 40 minutes I've talked quickly and covered a lot of ground about the basics of emotional intelligence. There's a lot more depth to this subject, as I think you're aware. 74% of you and from the last poll saying that this is a long-term commitment, and that's absolutely true. So we've looked at the 5 key competencies of emotional intelligence: self-awareness, self-regulation, motivation, empathy, social skills, and talked a little bit about that learning path to enrich your own emotional intelligence. Find out, determine what you think you're good at, where you feel that you're doing pretty well, and also understand where you have challenges. Engage with your colleagues, engage with your family and your friends, get some support, take some classes, read some books, start making small changes in how you react and how you develop your emotional IQ and your emotional vocabulary. And at some point, you will get people coming to you and telling you that, yeah, I really like this. I really like the change in how you're working, and I really see a positive impact on the organization. So on that note, I will thank you all for your kind attention, and I will close this off and hand it back to Kelly.
Thank you, Brian. Thank you so much for taking the time to spend with us today. If anyone has any questions for Brian or myself, please feel free to type those in now. Just real quick, I just wanted to remind you all, as Brian had mentioned, and New Horizons has recently launched our Center for Leadership and Development, offering more advanced courses such as those that we are presenting in our webinar series. So if you are interested in any of the material that was presented in this webinar, or if you have questions regarding our available course offerings, please contact your local center for further information. If you're not familiar with who your local New Horizons is, you can log on to newhorizons.com and do a zip code search to find the center nearest you. Also, just a reminder that this is the first webinar in a series of webinars on leadership and development that we will be running. So please log on to newhorizons.com, click on the webinars link, and you'll see a full list of upcoming sessions that you can register for. You can also find the webinar archive recording link on that website as well. So feel free to review any of our past webinar recordings there. Also, another friendly reminder to everyone, I will be sending out the link to view the session recording later today, so you can review that for anything you may have missed or in case you had audio problems. You can review that at any time, and that link will be live for the next year. Okay, so if anyone has any questions, feel free to type those in the chat now. So far, I don't see any. Brian, you went into a lot of detail on that, so I really appreciate it. And I think you did a fairly, oh, wait, a couple questions popped up. Oh, yeah, we did have a question. So for those that were unable to attend, will they have access to the recording? Yes, everyone will have access to this webinar recording. For those that registered but didn't attend, they'll receive an email with a link. And those that were unable to register, you can either forward the link onto them, or you can go to our webinar archive page on newhorizons.com, and you can find all of our past webinar recordings there. So feel free to do that whenever you get a chance. Let's see here. Any questions for Brian? Sorry, sorting through these. Okay, here's a question, Brian. Any suggestions on approaching a CEO who thinks he is emotionally intelligent but lacks self-awareness?
Wow, that's a good question, especially when you're talking to superiors. So, sorry, he lacks self-awareness. That was the question, correct?
Yes.
Kelly?
Yes.
Okay, yeah, lacks self-awareness. Okay, so yeah, it's that can be difficult, and it really depends on your relationship with the CEO. If this person, he or she, is someone that you can talk to in a social situation, it can be something which can say, you know, when you came into the office yesterday and you were angry, it really had an effect on my team. And if you get a puzzled look, and it's appropriate that you can, you know, delve into that conversation a little bit more, you can maybe explain how that affected your team's ability to work. And it can be a question of, or you can approach it to say, you know, yesterday it seemed to be a pretty stormy day. There was lots going on with you, and you know, my team really felt a bit nervous about what was going on. And it's kind of trying to approach it a little bit sideways, and it's a difficult question to answer precisely, because it really depends on the context of your relationship. So if you have the ability to talk to them directly about it, and you have that sort of relationship with them, fine. Or if you can find a way to relate his performance or her performance with the effects that it's had on your team and on the organization as you've seen it, that might be the best way to take care of, to sort of engage that piece, if you will.
All right. Next question is, how would you prepare for interactions with difficult customers?
Ooh, difficult customers. Yeah. Yeah, I have a lot of experience in that. Unfortunately, I've had some, and I try not to be now, by the way. Dealing with difficult customers is it's about preparation, and it's about understanding what they're trying to do, why they're difficult, understand what's pushing their buttons. Is it a past interaction that they've had with your organization, so you can do some research internally? Is it something that that you know, the organization has fallen down on? So find out why they're difficult. That's really the first, I think, the first point you've got to go through, and try and understand what their business need is. And it is something that the organization or other organizations maybe have failed them in the past, and that you have a way to helping them with their true business need.
All right. Next question we have, a lot of them came through, so I think people were just thinking, when you make a mistake, how do you quickly recover from it?
Ooh, tricky. Depends on the nature of the mistake, of course, but you know, first, I think the first and foremost, when you make a mistake, admit it. That's really the quickest and easiest way to recover from a mistake, is just admit that you made a mistake. Yeah, I made a mistake. And not so much I made a mistake, but I made a mistake, and here's how we're going to fix it. So you can't just stop by saying I made the mistake, and here's how we're gonna address it going forward.
All right. Next question, how do you handle a hostile situation, and do you approach your team on the outcome?
So hostile situations are tricky, and the best thing you can do in any hostile situation where emotions are running high is to walk away and reconvene. I've had a number of these situations over the years, of course, and I think we've all experienced them at some point. it's very difficult to get past a heightened emotional response at that point. So you really do need to just walk away. If someone is, if you're in that situation, suggest, listen, let's take a break. Let's reconvene, talk about this tomorrow, in a few hours, this afternoon, whatever you think an appropriate time frame is. Now, engaging with the rest of the team really depends on the nature of the situation. But if it's a one-on-one hostile situation, or if it's a generally hostile situation within a group of people, you need to disengage, step back, find out what's causing the problems, and try and find a gentler way to discuss it, or a more factual way to discuss it. That's kind of a tough to give a definitive answer on that one. Very situationally dependent.
All right. This next question is, how do you handle a peer that is accusing you of something and standing their ground but does not have proof?
Well, again, that's sort of it's kind of a hostile situation. So if someone's accusing you of something, they have no proof, and they're insistent that they're right and you're wrong, and if you are confident that what they're accusing you of is not true, you just disengage with them. There's not much you can do. If they're accusing you, in front of your boss, if you both work for the same person, they're accusing you of doing something in front of your boss, disengage from the three of you in the situation, have a one-on-one chat with your boss, but keep your discussion factual and not personal. You don't really want to engage on personality at that point. What you want to engage on is the facts of the situation.
All right, good advice. Next one is, if a manager has had several negative altercations with a staff member, how do they repair that relationship?
Ooh, several negative altercations with a staff member. It's really an issue around organizational management and organizational development. What it comes down to is, if the relationship between the manager and the staff member is something which is personally challenging, then you might want to engage with somebody from the HR group to negotiate between them. If it's not a personally challenging situation, but it's more work related, then from the staff member's perspective, recognizing that there is a problem and there may be a performance issue, and working on improving performance, and going to the manager and having a chat with them to say, okay, so there's been some challenges and some problems. I really want to address these. I'd like your advice on how I can move forward and how we can move forward with this. And if it's the manager's issue, then the manager really needs to take a step back and say, okay, so what is the problem that I have with this person? And why is this person pushing my buttons, and where is this problem actually coming from? That's a pretty complex situation. It's very situationally dependent.
All right, and we have someone asking if you could give an example of how to ask family or a work colleague to give you feedback.
It's actually easier than you think. When we talked near the end of the webinar, we talked about the understanding what you're good at and what you don't think you're good at, and actually just sitting down in a situation which is non-threatening. Say we start with your family. Family is usually a little bit easier. At least I found families a bit easier on this, and say, listen, I really want to develop my emotional intelligence, and there's 5 components of it that we've talked about, and I think I'm pretty good at X, Y, and Z, and I think that I really need to work on my social skills and my self-awareness. What do you think? And get their feedback, and say, ask for honest feedback. And the thing is, you really have to ask them for honest feedback, and you have to you can't judge what the feedback that they're giving you. You thank them for the feedback that they're giving you. You don't want to react to that. So I think one of the things when you're asking for feedback is make sure that you take that second to self-regulate before you react to what they're saying.
All right. All right, Brian. Well, thank you so much for your time today. We do have a few more questions, but I just want to say to everyone that a lot of these questions that are being asked are addressed in the full-length class at New Horizons. So if you'd like to take a deeper dive into emotional intelligence, I recommend that you visit our website at newhorizons.com and do a zip code search to find your nearest center. Or if you are already familiar with your local center, you can contact your account executive for further information on our upcoming courses, schedule, and pricing. So thank you everyone so much for attending today. As I said before, this session has been recorded and we will be sending you all a link to view that session recording later today. Also want to thank Brian so much, and we look forward to having him join us on next month's webinar for the Leadership and Development webinar series. So thank you so much, everyone. You may now log off.
Beautiful. Thanks very much, Kelly. Thanks.